Good evening. I call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council of October 10th, 2016. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul.
Here.
Wickman.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Roybal.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Shakti.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Coop.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Gutwein.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. And we have some special guests from Cub Scout Den 166 who are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then we'll stay standing for a moment of silent prayer. So, sir.
Color guard attention. Audience, please rise. Color guard forward march. Color guard halt. Post the flag of the United States of America. Scout salute. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
2. Color guard about face. Color guard forward march. Color guard halt. Audience, thank you for joining us. Color guard dismissed.
Very nice. Please be seated. Let's give this guys a round. Well, thank you again for coming out. Very well done. That's the best we've had. So thank you, gentlemen. Best of luck to you. All right, public comment tonight. Seems like a pretty tame group, so I'll skip the rules of public comment. Although I will remind folks that we do have a timing system, and it's a new timing system. So I'm not exactly 100% sure what it'll look like to you down there, but I think it's the same deal. A minute and a half, it'll look green, and then 30 seconds yellow, and at the end red, and we'll ask you to politely wrap up your comments. So first and only on our agenda, or on our sign-up list, but I think others might want to speak, is Mr. Bob Zockman. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, man.
Welcome. If you want to jump up here. Yeah, thank you.
I didn't know the new rules that we only had 2 minutes.
No, you got 3. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Good evening, Mayor Paul, members of City Council. My name is Bob Zockman. I'm a retired Jeffco educator with 32 years of experience in Jeffco schools. I served for 5 years in Lakewood on the Heritage, Culture, and the Arts Commission, and then helped develop, build, and then chaired the Heritage, Culture, and the Arts Alliance for 5 years. I am asking that the citizens of Lakewood endorse with me the 3A and 3B mill and bond proposition. The 3 main goals of 3A and B are increase student college and career readiness and increase access to high-quality learning programs, providing students with the instruction, skills, and hands-on learning necessary for success in college and the workplace through the expansion of STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as arts, music, and career and technical programs. Stop the exodus and keep the high-quality teachers in our schools. Having a good teacher can make all the difference for our students in the classroom. Jeffco is committed to educational excellence by attracting and retaining high-quality teachers through a transparent and competitive compensation system. Repair and update Jeffco schools to ensure they last another 45 years. The average school building in Jeffco is more than 45 years old. 110 elementary, middle, and high school buildings will receive repairs and improvements long overdue, including roofs, plumbing, electrical, lighting, and mechanical systems. What if 3A and 3B pass? We will see schools built in the Northwest Corridor, the ability to attract and retain the best and brightest teachers in all neighborhood and option and charter schools, half-time counselors in every elementary school, improvements to security and emergency management, increased student-based budgeting funding for small schools, efficiencies, renovations, maintenance, improvements, and additions in charter, option, and neighborhood schools. Thriving schools help keep real estate values strong. Home buyers and sellers clearly value the quality of local schools, and homebuyers are willing to sacrifice certain things to live in the right school district. But we also need to talk about what happens if 3A and 3B doesn't pass. Here's a list of the type of tough decisions and changes we will need to see across the district if these measures do not pass. Closures and consolidations, split schedules, year-round schools, changing boundaries in transportation radius, limited ability to meet basic deferred maintenance, continuing to lose great staff, larger class sizes, higher fees for parents, lack of resources for student learning, cutting programs and opportunities for students. So I hope that all of you will help join me in passing 3A and 3B. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming out tonight. Director Minton, I don't have you on the list, but my understanding is you'd like to talk with us about trains. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Yes, I'm Natalie Minton, Regional Transportation District Director, and also Ward 5 resident. So I'm here to give you a little bit of an update. I usually come to you when there's especially service changes that will affect the area. So just to give you a heads up on what we are looking at right now for winter service changes. So it's a few months down the line, a little bit down the line. One is probably most interest to City Council is the W line. Right now runs during peak periods a little more than other trains throughout the system, other lines. The W line had high hopes when those, before I was on the RTD board, as to projections. Let me just state that projections for the ridership are nowhere close to what had been presented at that time. So again, that train runs a little bit more frequently than the other lines. We're going to reduce it down to 15-minute intervals during the peak period, which matches what's on the rest of the system. Westline does not justify the expense. So that, I think, will be a really small change. For most people, they'll adjust to it, but it's always of importance with connections. So even though we're reducing it to the 15, how do people make the connection? Because that's what the RTD system is about, as a lot of riders use more than one leg getting where they're going. So yes, we're talking about trains, but we're also talking about what the majority of people use on RTD, and that is the buses still. So 2/3 of our riders are using that, I believe, right around there. The other one is on the south side of Green Mountain. That's the 116L, which is proposed to be discontinued due to low ridership. What is to fill in for that is really two systems, or two routes that are already there, the Route 21 bus and the Green Mountain Call-In Ride. So hopefully it'll actually bump the numbers on the Green Mountain Call-In Ride, because we need some more riders using that to lower the subsidies. Bridge lights. Moving on to a different one, 6th Avenue bridge lights. Some of you may have noticed as the time went on, fewer lights were there, and now it's shut down completely. The reason for that is the way the original design was, it's strung up, right? So when one of the bulbs goes out, we got to shut down part of the highway to go in and replace this thing. So that doesn't make sense. So what we're going to do is take, again, before my time, we're going to take those strung lights out. We're going to put them on the base. The lights will point up. Therefore, when they do go out, we don't have to shut down a lane. All right? So there may be some artistic value to the strung lights, but personally I can't justify shutting down the highway when we have one bulb go out. Just imagine your Christmas tree lights and what you'd have to deal with. So similar situation. The A-line, I don't know how I'm rapid says. What does that mean? It's yellow, so I got 30 seconds. This is the new system. Okay.
We're learning together.
Okay. All right. So that's what it says, wrap.
You're fine. Don't worry.
Right. With the A-line, we obviously are having some challenges. Just a reminder, it is a different system. This is commuter rail, not the light rail. So that's why we see a difference, different electricity running the system. It's got some weird things that I would have never understood. It's got a dead zone where we have to coast through at a certain speed to make it through. The feds had put some regulations on us after the fast tracks had come in because of a big wreck out in California. So we have these challenges. The crossings are the big thing, and I'm sorry, I want to cover this real quick. I know I'm past my time.
You're fine.
Okay. With the crossings right now, why we have guards out there, and the PUC and especially Federal Railroad has said we've got some problems. The arms are coming down too soon and staying down too long. The concern is that after people get used to this until we fix the software glitch, people will be going through it around the arms, and then we're going to have a serious fatality. So the PUC and the Federal Railroad want us out there until we've resolved it. This could potentially affect the other lines which are supposed to open. The B line running and the gold line. They're all the same system. I'm giving you a heads up. Until we resolve this, we could be seeing some other things from this. That's all I know I'm over my time. But thank you. If there's any questions, go to rtd-denver.com. Down at the bottom is Board of Directors, and people can contact me with comments regarding any of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. My understanding, those lights were supposed to be 20-year light bulbs. Guess that didn't quite work.
I'm not really sold on this, and I won't even go off on the art project that we have that we spent thousands of dollars on over it. The Fed Center station. I'm disappointed about staff, and they said, no, we're kind of still sold on it, but yeah, it's not
Well, it'd be nice to have the lights back on somehow on the bridge because it's a pretty cool bridge.
It is. One last thing somebody mentioned, is that a safety concern with St. Anthony's and the helicopters? No, it is not at all part of that, so not an issue there.
All right, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for public comment? Seeing none, I will close. Oh, geez, I'm so sorry. Good evening, welcome. Thank you. Yes, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, and thank you very much for having me tonight. My name's Chris Lorm, a resident of the Lasley neighborhood, and just wanted to come tonight, and with the budgetary concerns coming up for this year, just wanted to put my 2 cents in support of the Lasley Park redevelopment, and just want to bring a voice of myself and a larger group that there's still a large demand to have that park redeveloped, and we would love to see that happen. I also had sent out a letter to the council and the mayor previously, just showing how that the neighborhood has responded to that very positively. They're very excited, still asking questions on any updates possible for that. And we appreciate the support of the Lakewood, the council, the mayor, and also the representatives on staff to help bring that to the point it is now, and hoping that with the support that we have to push that over the line into 2017 and make that happen. So just wanted to come here and just vocalize myself one more time and show support for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out and for your email as well. All right, now that exhausts the folks who wished to speak. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson had a question related to RTD. So, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Menton. Could you please speak to any kind of plans that RTD has regarding wayfinding at DIA? I understand that there's been some frustration there, and
yeah, there's frustration at DIA and Union Station still, both of them. And I think it goes beyond especially those who have sight to where those who especially who may have sight challenges, are especially challenged. So there are teams that have been put together to address the signage that's present. And I think we're seeing it with, still going back to some of the lines that came in, even the B line, even though we had tried to connect as best with everybody who needed to give input on what needed to be there for the wayfinding. But we have a team that's addressing these challenges right now.
So you're
And-
looking into it.
Yeah.
Good.
And for me personally, what I've just started to go out with is my own camera and just start to take the shots of it, because especially if you get travelers, it's very frustrating. It's one thing if you're walking around with your purse. It's a whole nother thing when you've got 2 pieces of luggage with you and maybe a couple kids and, you know, all of that.
Good, I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Council President Shakti? I don't think this is RTD, is it? Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you.
I pushed the wrong button. I wanted to thank you for coming out to express community support for Lasley Park. We've been through an extensive planning process, and it's great to see the community behind this, and I'm excited about the possibilities as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, I will now close public comment. Will the clerk please read item 5 into the record?
Item 5, first public hearing for ordinance O 2016-13, adopting a revised budget for the year 2016 for the city of Lakewood, Colorado, and further adopting the annual budget for the city for the fiscal year beginning on the first day of January 2017 and ending on December 31st, 2017, estimating the amount of money necessary to be raised by levying taxes for the year 2016 to defray the costs of municipal government of the city of Lakewood, Colorado for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017 and ending December 31st, 2017, and estimating the amount of money to be derived from other revenue sources, setting forth the appropriations for each fund.
Thank you. And to kick us off tonight, we have our finance director, Mr. Larry Dorr, who's going to walk us through a presentation. We've had a study session, and this will be our first public hearing on this, one of 2.
Well, thank you, Mayor Paul, and good evening once again. My name is Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Finance Director, and happy Columbus Day to all of you. Tonight is the first of 2 public hearings on the city's budget. There'll be a chance for the public to come down on the microphone and have comments about the projects or initiatives in the budget. Council has had its copy of the budget since September 9th. It's a nice 530 pages of detail and overview and big picture and everything in between. It's also been on lakewood.org, this exact document, since September 9th. And as mentioned by Mayor Paul, we had a study session of the council on September 19th. I'll just give the clerk one more moment to there we are, have the presentation on the screen. And but prior to the study session, City Council's Budget and Audit Committee, which consists of council members Gutwein, Franks, and Coop, had a chance to review all of the projections, all of the estimates in the budget, along with our 3 citizen members, John Ludwigson, Tim Dennis, and Donald Tallman. That group, it has a look at our estimates, looks at our results from the prior year, and gives feedback on the direction of those. Tonight I mentioned our public hearing, and tonight Council's vote will authorize publication of the ordinance and scheduling of a second public hearing to occur on October 24th, 2 weeks from tonight. So let's see. I want to go into some high level and into some detail as well. There won't be much new information for council other than my follow-ups, Mayor, which I'll get to at a later portion in my presentation. At our study session, we had a number of questions, and I'll follow up with all of that information at that time. But there will be those in the audience and watching at home or later watching on lakewood.org on our tape delay for whom this may be their first interaction with the city budget. So I want to give some overview context and then talk a little bit about our results and projects underway and things that are planned for all new in this 2017 budget. we talk a lot about many of the different activities of the city, but I use some of the jargon like general fund or our operating funds and things like this. The main reason is that 2/3 of the city's revenues can be used for any general municipal purpose. 1/3 of the funds are restricted for specific purposes. So for this presentation, I'll just be focusing on the general fund. And then in the general fund, it's really the income that we tend to focus on because it's the thing that we can't control. And I'll talk about the two largest sources of income here as we go through. And you'll generally get a feel, if you're one in the audience, council understands this and has seen this for many years, but really the city functions like a self-employed household or a self-employed business. The income can vary from year to year, and we need to plan for that volatility as we go along. Also, we have some constitutional restrictions, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But you see that largely we are driven as a city, our income as a city for services, by sales and use tax. So we tend to really focus on that, and I'll give a little more information. And our second largest source of income, property tax. Now you do see charges for service there are slightly larger, but that's a variety of different income sources. And of course, I always call to other. It's a large slice, but no one piece is greater than 2%. This makes up things like licenses and permits, fines, forfeits, tobacco tax, investment income, and things of that nature. The city's sales tax rate, or I should say when you purchase something in the city of Lakewood, this is the sales tax rate paid on tangible goods that are purchased. And Regional Transportation District Director Menton was here. There is a sales tax as well for the RTD, and that makes up part of the total 7.5%. But the city's portion is about 40% of the total sales tax rate. In property tax, it's much smaller. This would be a property tax bill on a $300,000 home in Lakewood. As you can see, it's just a couple percent of the total tax bill. And then also we had the gentleman here regarding the ballot initiative for Jeffco Schools. And as you can see, that's really the largest property tax entity for our community. I want to give a little bit of background on the 2015 results. This is sort of budgeting 101. We want to look backwards. How are things going today? How are we feeling about the near term and for 2017? First of all, let me call to a change to this slide, council members and mayor. I've added the zeros there. So for the top right, our 2015 income as a city was $112,953,000. And as you can see, our operating subtotal is favorable, $11,154,000. And that should be visible to the public as being a city with a financial income statement that's on very sturdy ground. Of course, we did have these next things that are deducts from that. The Tabor refund that'll have to be made. I mentioned the constitutional restriction, and that's an amendment to the state's constitution that requires that refund. Also, council in its 2015 revised budget authorized reserve transfers for street medians, a slash facility, and playground replacements, and a sidewalk program. I'll have some slides that show you some of the results of those transfers, and then of course you see the bottom line. So how are things going year to date? Well, it's just the 6th business day of the month, and we've just closed up the financial statements for September, and in 2 weeks I'll update this slide for you. We just had those numbers in mid-afternoon today, but we'll have an update of this for council in a couple of weeks. I don't anticipate that there'll be large changes, but you can see here that our sales tax revenues and motor vehicle use tax revenues, two very large sources, up 6.8 and 5.6 respectively. We do have some decreases, and I've got a couple of those here, franchise fees and also fines. We do have some decreases in some smaller sources of revenue as well, like tobacco tax. So total revenues, 3.8%, and that's on plan, as are total expenditures at 6%. So that gives you a little feel for where we are today. We look at economic forecasts across the state and compare them to what we're thinking for the near term and next year. I mentioned at the study session that the governor's office and the legislature's legislative council, they employ full-time professional economists. They're PhDs. This is what they do for a living, and they put out these very, very robust reports. In fact, one was released during our study session on September 19th. Actually, both of them were, and I've updated them. Each of them have revised their projections down just a little bit. The legislature's sales tax forecast for next year was 4.9%. You now see it right in the middle there at 4.2. And the governor's office from 4.5 to 4.3, and you see that to the left. And then, of course, you see the projections for Lakewood. In addition to these forecasts, in addition to looking at how we're doing year to date, we also look around the Lakewood economy, and it's quite visible what's happening. This is the West Colfax headquarters of First Bank, and they've just completed an $80 million expansion to their headquarters here in Lakewood, and this demonstrates the willingness and the interest of the private sector to invest in a safe community with a quality living environment and so forth. We have a number of these examples. This was shot a year ago as well, and this is the completed Hyatt House at Belmar. And it's not just the office and hotel sectors, but also retail. And I don't have all of the pictures from our study session, but retail, multifamily construction, single-family residential construction, restaurants, and convenience stores. There's a lot of investment, hundreds of millions of dollars happening in the Lakewood community. So now switching gears a little bit to the expense side of the equation, and I do use that expression, even though we governmental accountants refer to them as expenditures. That's not a commonly used expression. So I'm just gonna say expenses, and hopefully that'll be clearer to the audience. But we provide services, so we don't manufacture any goods, we don't possess any patents, we don't have any inventory. We just have the people that provide services, and so you can see 3/4 of the spending is on personnel, and then the remainder, the large portion of the remainder, is for things like fuel for our police cars and our snow plows, and of course water and fertilizer and equipment for our workers who take care of our parks. So those are the services and supplies. And then in the general fund we do have some capital expenses as well. So for 2017, I want to highlight a few of the things discussed at the study session. You know, obviously, I mentioned already our police, public works, and our parks department, our community resources department. Obviously, they make up the crux of the business of the services provided to the Lakewood community. So it won't be surprising for you to see the spending initiatives in 2017 are related to the police department in both staffing and technology, in community resources, in parks and facilities, as we just heard from the gentleman regarding Lasley Park, and then also in public works, not just transportation, I should add infrastructure to that as well, and then in our information technology area, and then finally we have some initiatives in both employee compensation and risk management reserves, and those were covered in more detail, but I'll give some of that as well. So at our study session, if folks want to go back and look at that video, we had discussion and presentation from our police chief, community resources director, public works director, and our IT director on all of these initiatives. But I'll touch on them at a high level. In 2015, our police department undertook a study of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and it recommended additions to the Lakewood Police Force of 26 people. And the reason being it will allow for a preventative patrol and more community policing and so forth. And so in 2015, council authorized 8 additional police agents and 2 community service officers. And since then, we've had those agents hired in a couple of recruit classes, both in January and July of this year. We also hired and filled the community service officer positions earlier this year. So those initiatives directed last year by Mayor and Council are well underway. We do need to, and it's recommended to add, it's proposed in this budget, an additional 8 agents so that we can begin to get closer to that 26. However, allow our command staff and chief to analyze the impact of adding those additional agents. And Chief McCaskey talked a little bit about that at the study session. But what he also brought to light is the difficulty in recruitment and in hiring and in training our police agents. Not only are we trying to add those agents that are both in progress and proposed to grow the size of the police force, but we're backfilling retirements, and so forth as well. And so it's a challenge. In fact, Chief McCaskey has scheduled a contingent upon the approval of this budget, a 20 recruit police class in January, and it'll be one of the largest that the city has undertaken. And it'll be a challenge for him to find 20 very highly qualified candidates to fill such a large police recruit academy. And he described the 18-month progress from recruitment to a police agent being completely independent and on the street. So that's out there as well. In terms of the complexity of growing the police force, it would be nearly impossible to add that number of agents, but it makes sense to have some prudence to digest that number and see what the level of impact may be. So hence a phased approach. In addition, Chief McCaskey and our Chief Information Officer, Mark Prey, described the replacement of mobile data computers. We're already replacing the radios in the police units, in the cars. Now it's time for the mobile data computers. They've sort of run their course. They've reached the right age. And this proposed budget would also have those mobile data computers go in the non-patrol vehicles, those used in the investigations division and so forth. And then last but not least, and these three things really, radios, mobile data computers, and smartphones, are an initiative of the two departments. The Information Technology Department needs to assist, administer, and coordinate. And the third thing being smartphones. And that is for our police agents to really catch up with the standard in law enforcement now, with the ability to take photographs, communicate with text messaging, record videos, and so forth out in the field. So that's what's happening in the police department in this proposed budget. And I have a couple of follow-up questions here that were posed to Chief McCaskey, and I'll give you those on a high level here in a minute. So in our Community Resources Department, we received an update from Kit Newland on playground renovations. And last year, as I showed in the 2015 council authorized playground renovations at Green Gables, Westgate, Bonfils Stanton, and here at Ritchie Park as well. So those have all been completed. And I did have a question as well on the pipeline of playground replacements, and I've got a couple of details on that coming up as well, Mayor, when I get to the responses. So then underway in the department is the Carmody Park change project and things happening at the Recreation Center at Carmody and also at Founders Park. Those are a couple of things already underway and things that are already happening. And then also last year, $800,000 in spending was authorized for median beautification. I've got a question there that I'll get to in a moment, more detail. But medians will be improved on Colfax, on Pierce, on Wadsworth, on Bear Creek Boulevard, on Jewel, and on Kipling Parkway. These are described in the budget in a little more detail as well, and we got a little bit of a background from Director Newland. Last year, Council authorized a renovation to the Lakewood Link Recreation Center pool, and it is beloved and it will be missed, the pirate ship, of course, but it's been removed and that reconstruction is well underway, and time for that to show some progress. It's a very popular facility in the community, and I know that Community Resources and the neighborhood is real excited about the change to come there. Of course, we're replacing tennis courts, and that was described by Director Newland as well, as was the move of the Estes Motel to the Heritage Center, and I can see some council members and the mayor there and the ribbon cutting, as expected. But now some proposed projects. In this budget is proposed the replacement of the Belmar Park amphitheater cover. It's a little difficult to see in the photographs, but the facility is nearly 17 years old. It's been in the weather, the rain, the snow, the sun, and it's just taken its toll, and it's time to replace that. And so that's proposed in the budget. In addition, 2 years ago now, Council authorized an exterior renovation of the concrete stairways and walkways around the Public Safety Center. This would be phase 2 of that, which would be to improve the locker rooms, restrooms in the building as well, and remodeling of our oldest office spaces in the information technology department. That is proposed as well, as is the Lasley Park improvements project, and that's, I know, or the audience should know that this has been a long discussed item in the community and amongst the council members, and of course the Lakewood staff as well, to arrive at a plan that can work and provide for all in the community, and that's in the proposed budget as well, as is a very significant park path replacement program across the community as well. These are some of the shots from our inventory that need some attention. Okay, on to a couple of projects that are done in community resources. Actually, I guess I'm going to go ahead and close right here with this one that's concluded, and that's at the Civic Center Plaza. You know, this was council's vision, was to have a reconstructed Civic Center Plaza that could endure and be available for public engagement and public activities. And this was the recent event on Civic Center Plaza, and you can tell that it's pretty well attended and certainly enjoyed as well by the community. So that is complete as well. Excuse me one moment. Next, we got an update from our Public Works Director, Jay Hutchison, on the projects completed, underway, and proposed in the budget, and I'll do those at a high level here. In Belmar Park, there was a stabilization project of Weir Gulch. Completed, of course, Wadsworth from 10th to 14th, which has got multiple features to it, not just the vehicle transportation and medians, but also some of the stormwater management or whatnot. These are some of the things that will come a little bit further down. US 6th Bridge over Garrison, and a couple of shots of this project as well. This is the frontage road looking west from the north side of 6th. We completed traffic signals on Wadsworth at Jefferson, Mansfield, and Mississippi, and also on Pierce at Mississippi, in order to bring these into the most modern standard for safety and for traffic flow. We've done a lot in the sidewalk project and projects, and this Pierce Walk north of Colfax, this is the sort of before and afters that we're getting more and more excited about. Also at the at the West Rail Station to Colfax. And in addition, not pictured, we had sidewalk projects at Yale west of Yukon. Garrison W-Rail Bicycle Shelter. We also undertook an emergency needs assessment of the city's fleet fueling station, and we've undertaken this expansion of the city's fleet fuel storage so that in emergency situations we'd be able to provide fuel to our first responders and to our snowplows, and that's what the new fueling station looks like now. And Director Hutchison described the idea that this is much more efficient for workers, but also safer for the environment and so forth. We've done bicycle lane work across the city, not only here at Denver West Parkway, as pictured, but at Sims, Pierce, Vance, and Kentucky. So lots going on there. Director Hutchison described some of the projects that are underway. This is Weir Gulch at Tennessee Avenue. And of course, Wadsworth from Highland Drive to 10th. Major construction happening there. Last year, council authorized a $2 million supplement to the city's sidewalk program, and that will allow for the construction of sidewalks on Sheridan Boulevard. This is a significant project, and you can see here, this is, of course, what's present now, which is difficult, obviously, for our pedestrians in the community, and that will be a big change. It's one of the largest sidewalk projects. First Avenue Walk, Newland to Harlan, also in the works, and council took some action earlier this year to do some undergrounding of utilities there as well. Okay, newly proposed would be a change at the intersection of Crestline and Grant Ranch Boulevard. This is conceptual in nature, but the idea is to get vehicles at a safer speed at this intersection, and yet not implement the more traditional, sort of streetlight situation, which can be more sustainable for the long haul. And then last but not least, we heard from our Chief Information Officer, Mark Prey, on the matters of information technology. We have a couple of priorities we're focusing on. We first have a governance process that Mr. Prey has led across the city for more than a year now, and our focus is on modernization, both cloud, and computing in the cloud, using mobile devices, and then commercial off-the-shelf, that's COTS, C-O-T-S, commercial off-the-shelf software. And then, of course, the less exciting yet more necessary security activities. And related to that, Mr. Prey brought to City Council in April a supplemental ordinance to provide appropriations for the projects listed here. Again, you'll see, yes, we need to update existing systems in our municipal courts, but we also have on here our police radios and some security software as well that's just necessary in this day and age in order to make things safe and operable. Also, in this proposed budget, we have an expansion of connectivity across city facilities with fiber optic. Again, I mentioned smartphones for the agents. It's sort of a dual project. A core firewalls, once again, this is a security-related initiative to keep our networks secure. This mobile data computer replacement for police department. And then also we're going to assess our enterprise resource program, which is essentially our HR and finance activities. We have a 13-year-old system there, and we need to make sure that it's functioning at its highest level and providing information that our workers need to be productive. So that covers what's proposed, and I'll do this now in sort of a summary way. Here are the reserve spending initiatives approved by council over the last 4 years, and where they've gone and what they've done. And then here's what is proposed in this 2017 budget with a little more detail. I didn't touch on things like Sunset Park or maybe one or two of the other items listed here, so I wanted to put that there and allow you to have it reconcile as you go through the budget numbers. So with that, Mayor, what I'd like to do is pause for a moment and address, I took very good notes, and our budget accountant, Carrie, was able to help me with all of the questions that came from council that we weren't able to answer, that took a little research, and I've got that. And what I'd like to do is just sort of run through them. But I would anticipate that you and members of City Council would have some follow-up questions, but some yes, maybe some won't. So maybe I can just run through them all, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Thank you, sir. Please.
Very good. Okay. Let's see, and forgive me, for those who haven't seen the study session, I'm going to repeat the question and give a little context as to the business activity. It'll also refresh your memories as well, and then I'll give some detailed answers to the question. So this first one I had was regarding the Lakewood Park Tennis Center. And I was interested in this myself in terms of what the activities were. And so I dug into it just a little bit to better understand it. And Lakewood Park is at 150 South Kipling Parkway, and there are 8 tennis courts there. And the city has entered into an agreement with a concessionaire to provide the scheduling and so forth, all the activities and when things happen, when there are doubles, singles play, and instruction play, and all of those sorts of things. There's a concessionaire there. And the concessionaire is required to pay the city a percentage of its gross income beginning in the year 2020. I went ahead and read over the contract and kind of familiarized myself with that whole process. between now and 2020, the concessionaire is not responsible for paying a percentage of its income. However, they were required to contribute $50,000 toward the reconstruction of the tennis courts, and the city would reimburse the concessionaire for the balance, and that's what occurred. So those tennis courts have been replaced and reconstructed, and the concessionaire paid $132,000 for the reconstruction of those tennis courts, and the city reimbursed the concessionaire for all of the cost except for the $50,000. So I think the question was, should the city be collecting $50,000? And that was not the case. The way the contract reads is the city pays the concessionaire. It replaced the tennis courts, and that expenditure was budgeted for the city to reimburse the concessionaire for the amount that the city agreed to in the concessionaire agreement. I got to tell you, that took a little while for me to read through. It is an 8 or 9 page agreement, and one that calls for the concessionaire to manage and replace the entire courts, and then they will pay the city a percentage of gross revenue beginning in 2020. The next question was related to special projects, and there's a section in the budget. We were talking about page 415, and we were talking about really a very large line item. It was $6,580,000, and so the title of it was Debt Obligations and Special Projects. And this is a little bit of a catch-all. We have a section of the budget titled Non-Departmental. It doesn't fall to any one department. For example, the city makes payments on the Civic Center. It makes payments on recreation centers for which money has been borrowed to construct them. The city makes payments for remodeling that was done in the police building, early last decade, and other sections than we're attending to now. Anyhow, when you deduct those traditional debt expenses, when you deduct money spent out of the capital improvement fund, you boil all that down, it comes to $278,000 in special projects. That's the heart of it. And the largest piece in there is for the charitable giving program with the Lakewood Legacy. That's $100,000, and I know council is very familiar with that. However, in addition to that, there are other membership activities and sponsorships paid out of special projects. For example, for the Denver Business Journal, Jeffco Good News, Metro Mayor's Caucus, National Civic League, West Chamber, and Alliance for Innovation. Many of the sponsorships and memberships that I think you'd be familiar with. And then we have undertaken some special projects related to some very light remodeling around City Hall. So we've remodeled 1 or 2 conference rooms. We've just organized a reception area for our economic development facilities and so forth. So some very light sort of remodeling. So there is some consistency from year to year, but there can be some variability. So from $6.5 million down to $270,000. Hopefully that's a pretty good amount of detail there. We also had a question regarding the street median program, and there are some bullet points on page 476, but there weren't any dollar amounts attached to those, and the question was related to Bear Creek Boulevard and what would be spent on the entrance facilities there. And the entrance facilities would be on each end of Bear Creek Boulevard would be a combined $100,000, which is about 1/8 of the program. We then had a question for Chief McCaskey related to code enforcement. Code enforcement is a unit of 5 people, and they've been understaffed because of vacancy. Earlier this year, we're back up to full staff, but you can imagine if you lose 20 or 40% of the workforce, it can be challenging. And so we've gotten fully staffed again, and the chief is comfortable with the level of violations. He's comfortable with the level of complaints, that we haven't seen an unusual spike that would suggest a need for additional personnel, or that the existing personnel is inefficient or somehow not functioning really properly. So we just finished filling our 5th position about a month ago in code enforcement. So we feel as though it's fully staffed, and the chief would like that team to have some time to really get out there and be responsive to the calls. So that is what Chief McCaskey had on that. It was also asked for a list or schedule of upcoming playground replacements. And of course, the city has 76 playgrounds across the community. We're in the design phase now of the playground replacement at Sutherland Shire and Westboro. So those are out there. And then proposed in this budget would be playground replacements at Hilltop and Lasley, of course, as we've said. And then the next sort of group of priorities that would be out there would be, of course, all 76 aren't organized in terms of necessarily when they would be replaced, but the next priorities are South Sims, Addenbrook, Wright, Newland Square, and Jefferson Green. So those would be the next ones there. We had another question. For community resources, Director Newland was asked about the Performance Now expenditures. Performance Now is a company. They put on performances and programs at the Lakewood Cultural Center. They put on productions at the city's facilities. And what happens is the city collects revenue from the ticket sales, and then we pay an expenditure to Performance Now for the productions that they put on. And their productions have been very popular. Their productions have been quite successful. And so Performance Now is gaining more events on the calendar is what's happening there. So hence Performance Now. The expenditure is growing, but so too is the revenue, of course, related to their productions. We then had a question regarding water rights at Lasley Park, and the concern is, what are the water rights? Does the city possess them still? Are they still functioning? Do we have what we need? Water rights are very important when it comes to irrigating parks, because we don't always have a water line like you might have at your home to water your gardens or your lawns and so forth. That's not always the case. But in this case, Lasley Park is irrigated with a 2-inch water line and meter provided by Bancroft Clover Water, and the city also possesses the water rights that came as a part of the creation of Lasley Park. By the way, the park has been irrigated by the water line with Bancroft Clover since the 1960s, and there's no concern over the level of water available to irrigate Lasley Park. However, the city does possess for the community still the water rights, and those water rights can be used for other parks, such as Green Gables, Belmar, or Addenbrook Park. So the city still possesses those, and we're protecting those water rights, and we have them available not only for Lasley Park, but for other parks in the community, thankfully. So there's a little bit of a summary on that. We did have a detailed question regarding park improvements in the 50,000 and over pages. You know, I know that that's a real area of interest. They're way toward the back in like the 509, 510 type area. But the question was, we see a decrease of $330,000 from the original budget to the revised. And you know, I should speak to that. A lot of what we've talked about tonight are things like police or fuel. Those things are very, very consistent, right? They're 7 days a week, every week, services provided to the community. But outside of the general fund or in those restricted funds, we tend to do a lot of projects, and you saw some examples of that. The thing about projects is that sometimes construction can be more complicated. The design phase takes a little longer than we anticipated, or sometimes the public engagement just takes longer. Sometimes there's just need for more community input before we can, get decisions done and get the right decision for the community. And so, unfortunately, sometimes these projects don't occur on a schedule that we propose in the budget. This is just a one chance shot to get the schedule right for very large projects. And so the timing is off in this particular instance, where projects take a little bit longer, or sometimes the staff might think we can obtain some sort of grant funding, or we're waiting on a grantor, or we might be partnering with another city, whatever the case may be, and sometimes those things just create some delays. So the funding goes back down, and then it needs to be reauthorized by council so we can proceed. So there's carryover is really what this amounts to. And that's what's going on with park improvement projects and the original revised budget and then the proposed 2017 budget. Okay? We were also asked at the study session if staff could provide a list of requested sidewalk construction projects. And Director Hutchison compiled that. And just to emphasize, it's the requested sidewalk projects that are on this list. And we've put it on the website. So if you go to lakewood.org and go /budget and you go to that page, you'll see a button that you can click for the budget in whole, all 500 pages. But then if you, right below that, we've put another little button, and Mr. Hutchison's 4 pages of projects will pop up, and they're listed, sort of by like street design. And we just got that out there just late this afternoon. So I hope that is now operational, and we've checked on that. So that should be there as well. That seemed better than just handing it out, and that way the public can see that as well. And I'm not gonna read from it here. You can have a look at that. The next question was related to the Car 25 trolley, and the question was, where is that in the budget, and where can we see that? And let me just give a little background for those in the audience that might be thinking, what is the Car 25 trolley and its trolley barn? And forgive me, there's so many things to remember. I have to just read from my notes quite a bit. I apologize for that, but I want to get it right. So the Denver and Intermountain Railroad operated a rail line and trolley system in the early 1900s. As you could guess, this is related to Lakewood heritage. Interurban car number 25 was built in 1911 and is owned by the city of Lakewood. It's fully restored and operational. The trolley is stored at the Denver Federal Center in may I call it a warehouse. It's quite larger than an ordinary shed. And the cost for that storage is $3,500 a year. And because of the amount of that expense, we don't have the level of detail in the budget to get down to $3,500. It's lumped together with other projects and services and office supplies and things like that in the Community Resources Department Administration Division. So that is where the Car 25 trolley barn and storage and so forth, I beg your pardon, trolley storage is budgeted. We were asked about the Lakewood Stormwater Management Utility and the ability to do local projects from general or capital funds outside of the utility. Mr. Cox, Lakewood City Attorney, was asked to provide an opinion on that 3 weeks ago. And he's engaged other local and regional attorneys on the subject to begin building a legal opinion on that as it relates to restrictions under the state constitution and the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights as to whether or not local projects for stormwater management could be funded outside of the utility. So Mr. Cox is still working on a legal review on that. And fortunately, there aren't any immediate requests or needs or proposals in this 2017 budget. So it allows for him to be very thorough and diligent and consult with the experts that are in the know there. We did get a question regarding the city manager's budget message. It has a little bit of a different look this year. We've modernized it, but the question was related to typically the question was, in the past when I've looked at it, I've seen that there are references to the citizen survey, and I've looked back a number of years, and there aren't any references to the citizen survey for a couple reasons. One, we haven't performed a citizen survey in 3 years now, but because we've just gotten in the citizen survey, it's time for the city manager, the mayor, and council to review that survey and discuss with the community strategic initiatives and overall direction. And I would expect next year that we would make references to the citizen survey and council's review of it with the public and what areas of emphasis have come from the citizen survey that will then be budgetary items, and we will include that in the budget message going forward. One of the areas that can be confusing is that there are a lot of references to the core community values and what the needs of the community might be, and those things can tend to overlap just a little bit. Okay. A couple of things more, Mayor, and then I'd be just about ready to wrap it up with a couple of more slides, and then we can open it up for other questions. We did have a question in our 50,000 and over related to repairs for the Fox Hollow Golf Course for furnaces. And, you know, we've had a retirement of a very senior manager in our Community Resources Department who oversaw our golf operations and regional parks. By the way, we've merged regional parks with our urban parks and created one overall parks division. And indeed, this should be charged to the golf fund. So we took a look at our budget documentation and went a little bit deeper because our golf course should be, you know, supporting itself as it always has. So we're going to get that cleaned up. We did have a question at that same time regarding a recreation center passes. This was right towards the end of our session, and the request was for some data and information. I think it's probably a policy discussion that Mayor and Council will want to talk about overall, but we did look at some statistics and get some numbers together around the cost and so forth, and then also the revenue. We've looked at, the proposal was for students, and so we looked at our kindergarten through 12th grade age demographics. And we believe that admissions, and I have to emphasize that, admissions, not programs or youth sports or instruction or those kinds of things, but admissions could amount to $300,000. Now I say could amount to because that is an estimate. We have a lot of youth that are a part of family passes, and that may not be an overall loss in revenue. So we can't exactly quantify the number. And then for admission, so that was admission to recreation centers. For admissions to outdoor pools only, and let me just draw the distinction. So we have facilities that just have an outdoor pool, and we have facilities that have a recreation center and an outdoor pool. This is for these facilities just with outdoor pools. The revenue there is $35,000. Now, one of the things we would also have to estimate, but I think that Mayor and Council you should consider is the idea that there could be additional expenditures or expenses, beg your pardon, needed, additional lifeguarding, maybe additional staff for safety as it is, perhaps janitorial and other supplies, things like that. So those should be considered. Those are some of the things pointed out by our recreation staff. And then I've got a couple of questions, Mayor, since our last session. I think I'd just like to throw those in to the mix at the moment. I did get a question regarding the report for the 50,000 and over regarding the Art Space project, and I want to clarify that. It's one of those really unique situations where, let me just recall that appropriations expire each year. They have to be renewed by council. We only have a one-year budgetary cycle. And quite often, it's difficult for the staff to predict when exactly is the expenditure going to occur, especially when you're standing here on October 10th. I mean, we're really down to the last part of the year and their holidays and all that. And it's not the best thing for council to have your finance director coming back in with a list of things to get reappropriated each January. That takes up your time and attention, and it's just inefficient. So on this particular one, it's very clear. We have a very clear resolution and an agreement approved by council with Art Space that's $600,000. That's it. But there's a very good possibility that the rest of the expenditure could occur in mid-December or mid-January, and those things are difficult to predict. So that's the reason that that is listed as it is. And so I wanted to clear that up. And then last, I have a couple of questions regarding the expense for citizen engagement. And the first one was related to looking at Lakewood. And the question was, what is the amount of the cost or how much would be saved by eliminating one issue of Looking at Lakewood. Let me first describe that Looking at Lakewood is the city's newsletter. It goes to residences and to businesses. It goes to 78,600 addresses. We have an expense for printing, mail preparation, which is the listserv, the addresses, and postage, and the total is $17,800 per issue for Looking at Lakewood. It should be noted, I got some feedback here from our citizen engagement staff on the most recent survey, whereby it was noted 73% of respondents rated Looking at Lakewood as good or very good, and 79% said that they had used Looking at Lakewood frequently. So I've got those two stats along with it. And then the last question, Mayor, that I got, and then I'll wrap up my slides, was related to Spotlight on Lakewood, and that's a program on KLTV 8. And of course, if you live in Lakewood and you are a Comcast subscriber, we have about 30,000 households that are, then you can view KLTV 8 on your television, and you would be able to see Spotlight on Lakewood, which is programming that is produced by city staff on activities happening in Lakewood. Of course, you can then go to lakewood.org and view that, and then also the city has a channel on YouTube where the video can be reviewed, and it's been seen by a couple thousand viewers through those internet channels. We don't know how many people would be watching at home. It's impossible to know that, unfortunately, but again, about 30,000 subscribers. It's difficult to estimate, and there probably wouldn't be any savings because we have to provide programming and content on KLTV 8, and so if the staff wasn't producing Spotlight on Lakewood, it would need to produce other content for KLTV 8, and so I can't necessarily say that there would be any savings there. We would still be providing programming. Okay. I think those are the questions that I've had thus far. Let me go back to my final few slides, Mayor, to kind of wrap up, and then I'll be available for questions. First, I want to just reflect for you, Mayor and Council, and also the public in summary format, sort of what's been happening in the city. And you see growth. You see growth throughout, both in revenues, and then, of course, the expenses include all of those, not just the operating activities, but they include the reserve uses that I described. It includes all of those projects and initiatives are clumped together here. And then it shows you the city's projected ending reserves and then Tabor refund activities there, sort of in summary format. I always like to report to council sort of the legal requirements of the budget. We have a deadline in the charter for the city manager to present the budget. We've met that. We've met the balanced budget test and so forth. And now the last thing is to have the budget adopted by November 1st, and we're on schedule for that. We'll have a second public hearing and a vote of the city council in a couple of weeks, as I mentioned. So with that, I'll close up. I just want to repeat, I've said before, but for those who may be watching the first time, everything that we do, everything that is planned for and proposed in this budget is connected to council's core community values. And I mentioned earlier, businesses are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in the Lakewood community because of these core community values. When we run checks for accounts payable in the accounting department, when we respond to code enforcement violations, they're all connected to these core community values. And with that, I want to give thanks. If you have a look at page 3 in our budget, we have 17 leaders across this organization that are the budget coordinators, and they work really hard to compile and describe all of the data, and each of them work with not just other department heads, but other division managers and frontline staff to really make the budget what it is. And we will be presenting for the 17th year the City of Lakewood's budget to the Government Finance Officers Association for this Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. It's because of their hard work, and I want to give thanks to all of those good people for all of their diligence and attention to the process. So with that, Mayor, I think I'll sit down. I'm just going to put the dates back up, and be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, sir. Nicely done. I appreciate the follow-up to all the questions were asked as well. It's very helpful. So before I go into council questions and comments, I'm going to open the public hearing on the budget, and nobody has signed up to speak. Anybody in chambers wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment, and again, you'll be able to join us on October 24th to comment again. And there were a couple follow-ups that I needed to seek some help from council on. One had to do with, we did have an ACIC request or presentation with a recommendation last week to deal with some recycling in the parks. And I know that we've piloted 20 parks currently, and I want to make sure, I'm seeing 4 parks. Okay, so four parks now with an addition of 16 as we go forward. So there was an ask to have all of this done in full force before the budget. And I wanted to just clarify with this council that we want to go forward with the 4 now and the 16 as we go, and not, make sure we get to know what's going on, how to do it, what parks we need it, and what parks not to. Is there a consensus on that? Okay, all right. So we'll just go forward with what we're doing. There's also a great question about fireworks, and I did see that on the ACIC agenda that they are working on that, and we hope to see, I see Ms. Duffy shaking her head, we hope to see that recommendation come forward, which will then allow us to have that conversation about an appropriation down the road. Is that okay with the group? All right. And then, and this is going to need a little bit more discussion, so I'm going to leave it to Councilor Abel. Do you want to maybe go through questions on all of what Larry had first before we talk about the rec centers, or do you want to go right into the rec centers?
No, I'd like to talk about it now.
Okay.
The $335,000 includes estimates of increased use. It doesn't allow, as Larry mentioned, some families now have park passes. It does not allow for that. Those have not been subtracted from the total. So it's my understanding that 335,000 is the outside number. I'd like to observe that over the next couple of years at least, we're not going to be asking for a Tabor exemption. We will be looking at giving $4 million, maybe more, maybe a few less bucks back in Tabor refunds. Taking in $335,000 in less in fees for recreation centers lessens our Tabor overage by that exact amount. So it would be, for the next 2 years at least, a walk. Whatever we lose in fees, and it's not really a loss in fees. We're going to have people out there anyway, as Larry pointed out, there may be a requirement for more lifeguards and more paper towels. But I think those expenses are right now a shot in the dark and may not be an additional cost anyway. But I think $335,000, that's about what we're going to pay for pretty medians this year. And I think if our medians are worth, in the middle of the streets, are worth $335,000, the health and recreational opportunities for our youth is worth at least that, even without the Tabor offset in future years.
Okay. Council President Shakti?
So I was, I think that $335,000 invested in our kids totally makes sense. But I would want to make sure that we are spending that money in the way that will have the most impact on people's lives. And I don't feel like, and this might be it, but I don't feel like we've taken the time to really look at what are the different options and which of those have the biggest impacts. And so I think either some kind of study session, or there's an update to the master plan coming up this fall for community resources that will be an opportunity to look at where can we really have the most impact with our dollars.
Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. I had a question. The 335,000, that is what our previous admissions we collected, or that is a projection? I beg
your pardon, Larry Dora, Finance Director. Those were our 2015 activities.
Okay.
I also, just quickly looking at my notes, I didn't mention that this would not impact, and it's not related to any of the scholarship activities or grant activities that are already underway. Those are in place presently and are a function of this discussion as well, that we do have, again, scholarship and grant opportunities for youths that cannot afford admissions and so forth. So thank you. And those are the 2015 stats.
Okay, thank you. So that gives us a picture of what kind of admissions costs we would be losing, essentially. But then we don't have any idea how many kids could potentially be using this. And then in terms of just, the lifeguard costs, that's part-time employees, and I understand there's costs or requirements of a certain number of lifeguards that we would have. So it seems to me that that's not necessarily going to be a small ongoing cost. But do we have any idea?
I couldn't necessarily comment on the cost per se, but I do know that there's a lifeguard shortage. We have a real difficulty in our Director of HR, Jeff Nolan, would tell you that it's difficult to find certified and qualified lifeguards who can complete the instruction and certification. In fact, in order to attract lifeguards as much as we can, we need to pay for those certification classes and so forth for those lifeguards to be prepared to work. So sort of like the police, it's not just the funds having that available, but actually finding the right people to do that. But I think in the big picture, it wouldn't be hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional lifeguarding expenditures. I think we could say that.
Okay, that sounds good. I think, I just hesitate to make it sound like adding part-time employees is something that we just lightly do as a city when it comes to really any department. And then I think, I've spent a lot of time looking into this and thinking about it. Another piece that's really interesting to me is that Denver did a similar program, but with a really important difference, and that is that they did this as part of a package for that was a ballot initiative. It included $68 million per year in additional revenue coming into the city, and this was passed by the citizens. And so if we're looking at what other cities are doing, and we see that they passed a rather large amount of money coming in order to support this kind of health program, I just think, it makes me uncomfortable to think about just adding the service, but not adding the money. And then, of course, kind of on the big picture, I am thrilled that we're talking about healthy kids. Health of kids is one of the most important things to me. The entire reason that I am here is to work for the future of our kids. And it's what I, base all of my decisions on is our kids' future. And so I agree with what Shakti said. I think that if we are going to do something to help improve the health of our kids, I want to know that the program is actually going to help improve the health of our kids. Do we have any gaps in services? Are we, would playgrounds be a better way to spend this money? Do we want, is it young kids? Is it high school kids? Is it everyone in the middle? And just really make a targeted investment so that we know we are actually going to help our kids by doing something like this. And I agree that the Community Resources Master Plan is the exact kind of plan that we should be making, and this is the kind of conversation we should have before we make an investment of this nature. Thank you.
All right, I have Councilor Harrison and then Roy Ball.
I just had a couple of questions about this same comment. Larry, when you were talking there, or maybe it was Charlie that said it, talked something about the Tabor refund. If this $335,000 or whatever number we choose, could that come directly from the refund? Is it a way to apply some of the dollars that will be refunded through the Tabor refund so that all kids in Lakewood could have a free day or whatever?
Sure. Let's see. Well, a council's ordinance would authorize a reduction in the city's property tax for our current refund. I think the idea that Mr. Abel describes is that if in 2017, if this change were authorized for 2017, and during 2017, the city once again exceeded the limit, it would exceed the limit by a smaller amount, by the amount that is foregone in revenue from these recreation passes. So no, it wouldn't be the thing to grant these passes as a function of the refund. It would be decreasing future revenue, as Mr. Abel describes, in the coming year.
Okay, thank you. That helps a little bit. And then I'm going to direct this question to Councilor Abel. Had you given thought on the $335,000 that you were talking, how that specifically would be? Is it just daily passes? Is it an annual membership? What are because the devil's in the details. And that would be my concern about just giving a number at this point, approval, because have you given thought to all that?
I have. I've done a lot of homework on this. For instance, the directly answer your question, the $335,000 is access. It is not special programs. It is not reduced by the amounts of scholarships and other special programs that Larry was talking about. So it would be significantly less because of that if those other programs are continued. If we don't need the other programs by issuing a special access only pass, then we would save some money that way. Denver is not spending $68 million on Healthy Kids passes.
Let's stick to the question.
They are.
Thank you. The question was from Councilor Harrison.
I thought you gave me the floor.
I gave you the floor to answer the question, please.
Whatever.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, though, and you can address that. Ms. Harrison?
I'm done. Thank you.
Councilor Roybal and then Councilor Abel.
I think Councilor Abel answered a lot of my questions. I would like to encourage council to take a close look at this and let's have a discussion. Let's look at something positive. I'd like to look at a positive, healthy community, a safe community for our kids, and some place to go for them to be able to exercise after school. I think that would be something good that we can do. Now, getting back to the details, I'm not sure, but what I would recommend is let's ask staff to take a look at it and see what are possibilities. And then they can report back to us.
Councilor Abel, then Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Okay. I've heard that counselors want to know how this rates among other possibilities for making our kids healthier. I've heard no other possibilities from the mouths of those counselors. Denver did a $68 million packet, of which I believe $1,500,000 goes toward their park passes, which are much more full access. And
pardon me, it's
1.9.
1.9.
Thank you. Some years ago, we passed a 50% increase in our sales tax, and it has kept us healthy during the recession and the down years. And I would equate the Denver $68 million package that you referred to that 3A 50% increase in sales tax. And we could use that as the analogy to the Denver's largest. The question about how do we know how much good this investment would do? Have we measured how much good the monies we've invested in solving very needed solutions to food desert questions? We have a community-supported agriculture over at Mount Air Park that's producing vegetables and other healthy foods to be distributed in the food desert area. Do we have a direct measure of that and its success, or do we just assume that because we are providing better food for the tables in that food desert area that it is doing some good? I would say that is the case. I think we can assume that if kids have better access to recreation, it would make them somewhat healthier. I don't know how much empirical evidence you require at this stage. I am surprised that there is concern about something that would benefit kids in their health without question. As for lifeguard costs, it's my understanding that every year we staff lifeguards at the maximum expected need and then trim down from there. So I don't see that there are especially extra costs for lifeguards above and beyond what we're going to add. So some of these questions seem disingenuous at best, but I'll be happy to respond to other questions as they come up.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Abel, I think you're on to something, really. You mentioned swimming passes, is that right, as part of this package? Okay. I have a real soft spot in my heart for swimming passes. All of my children were competitive swimmers. It's a great sport. All their friends are clean and smell like Clorox. I loved it as a mother. I'm just wondering, would you be open or consider means testing for passes and perhaps look at giving them to children that have reduced lunches?
Certainly.
I would consider it. I don't think we're going to have an enormous rush to get these passes. They will be out there and available. How many youngsters take advantage of them is a figure we don't yet know. In fact, we were hoping to get some usage figures from Denver to see if there was an increase. Were you able to find those out, Ms. Hodgson, find out about those?
Thank you. Actually, staff did make calls. Ed made contact with the staff at Denver, and frankly, they don't keep good data. So we are unable to present to you measurements from when they started, I believe, in 2012 or 2013 to now. So we don't have any data from them, except to say there were definitely crowds, and it did really attract what they were hoping to attract, and that is kids in the pools and on the dry side at the rec centers.
We could wait years and watch the obesity problem grow in our children. I can't imagine why we would say no when we spend money, much more money for less deserving causes on a regular basis.
Well, and I guess I would interject a couple things. I don't want to question anybody's judgment of to how they feel about this. I think from what I've heard, everybody seems like it's a good idea. It's more or less the fact that we're going into a planning cycle and we don't really have all the answers for how a program like this would work. And it probably could very well be more than some toiletries and janitorial, to where we really do have some workloads that we're not prepared for. Seems to me that it would make sense to take advantage of the fact that we're starting a community resources master plan in 2017 to take a look at this, take a look at where we might have some gaps in service. It may not just be our youth, it might be seniors, it might be other folks, and let's get a better idea of those trends and a better understanding of what that might look like. I think it's a great idea, and I haven't heard one person say it's not. I think it has to do more with the process. And, you know, I think every dollar that we spend of the taxpayer's dollar, this group takes a look at, and it's meaningful dollars out there. I venture to guess there's not a lot of waste. So a comment about spending less than, I don't see as appropriate to the process. So I'm going to go with Councilor Gutwein, and then I'm trying to stay ahead, Councilor Vincent.
Thank you. Yeah, so a couple of other things that we might be able to do. Something I've thought about is we already support the middle school sports leagues program. This is something that's after school, it's at our schools. Does that need to be expanded? Can we offer that at the elementary schools? Then they get the social action as well. They get to be a part of a team. They are actively engaged. Does that increase our health? Do we want more tennis courts? Do the bike lanes and safe routes to school? There's tons of research that shows that kids that walk to school do better in school when we get there. And now that we don't have a lot of kids going to neighborhood schools, they could be, you know, that might be a better way to improve overall health. Let's see here. And then I think that Mayor Paul brought up something else that's really important to me, is that when we talk about walkability and bikeability, these things affect the entire community's health. And kids' health is incredibly important to me, but I'm learning, and I've learned from this job, that a healthy community is not just our healthy kids, and there's a lot of ways that we can improve the health of our kids and their parents who are taking care of them, and their grandparents, and all of our Lakewood citizens who don't have kids, and doing things like outdoor exercise equipment and walking lanes. And then, you know, we also have the community resource plan, which I have here. There's 2 huge documents that highlight, are there gaps? What are the gaps? What are the ways that we can improve the systems? And then we had the sustainability plan, which is something that I participated in, and it has an entire chapter on community health. It has, you know, are there partnerships that we can do with our schools? Do we need to do pop-up recreation activities? Underserved areas. And so I think that, to me, the most important point of this is that when we make a decision and a financial decision like this, we should have the input from the community. We should make sure we understand exactly what need, who exactly we're trying to serve, and that there's tons of evidence and to look at to see which programs actually work. And so all I'm asking is that there is a lot of questions about this. We don't know exactly how many people are going to participate. We don't know how many, there's just a lot of unknowns. I think that we should explore what our community has asked us to do. We should go through the entire planning process, and then we should make a decision so that we can benefit the greatest number of people and have a positive impact for our kids' health. Thank you.
So we'll go to Councilor Vincent, then Shakti, then Franks.
This is one of those times, unfortunately, when I agree with everything everybody's saying. It's very difficult, and I so agree with the goal on that. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to throw out something. What I'm hearing anyway is that people want some additional information, probably so they can go back with their constituents and say, this is what was needed and what was decided. I'm just wondering if we can, so we can address Councilor Abel's getting people in, if we could agree to the pool passes in the summer, which I understand that amount was for outdoor pools only. Is that correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And if we could get that in there so we can move forward on that and then make an agreement to whether it's a study session, I don't know how it would look, that we look at the different data and the different information that's coming out. This way I see that our children can get into pools, because I do represent an underserved area and a lot of them can't do that, and I think it's very important, and we need to have healthy kids. But I think we need to look at the data too to see what's out there before we spend an additional $300,000. That's what I'm hearing.
Council President Shakti.
So, Councilor Abel asked about what other opportunities there are, and this is an issue I've looked at a lot, and so. When I was running for office, I felt like there was a need for more teen activities. And after I started on council, we were able to hire an additional youth coordinator. We did a couple of things, and the Boys and Girls Club did a couple of things. So we have an additional after-school program. We have an additional summer program in a targeted neighborhood. And summer learning loss is a real thing. There's plenty of data showing that giving particularly targeted groups of kids access to enriching activities in the summer has a real effect. So we also saw the Boys and Girls Club did a teen program. So mostly they serve younger kids. They did a program where they focused on teens. They had them come together and do enriching group activities. And they were over-enrolled. There was a huge interest from Ward 3. So there are a lot of ways to serve our kids, to meet their needs, even doing more than we're doing now, and we totally need to think about that. But I don't think we should be flippant about this decision about how we spend money. And the other thing I would say is that, just like Councilor Gutwein was saying, we're looking at different populations. So as we were talking about before, seniors aren't all getting rides to the doctor, and they pay a fee to take those rides. So when we're making the decision about whether families who have money who could pay for this are going to be covering their own expenses, we need to think about what other needs there are in the community.
Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Just a couple of points. I wanted to first say I was appreciative when it was expanded beyond the children. I get a lot of feedback from my constituents who say we're always focused on the children, and not that we don't need to be, but we do have an aging population. And so I was glad to hear it was spoken about as kind of expanding it maybe more broadly. But also we do have a financial responsibility to make sure that we are first taking care of core needs and core services. So I'm like everyone else. I think that there's some really good points in here, but I'm a bit torn. And I would be more leaning towards, number one, gathering more information, and also I'm a big proponent of pilot programs to see what works, what the demand is. It really helps you plan. It helps you position those services without a very large commitment, and you reduce your risk. So as a project manager, I'm always looking for, can I pilot something? Can I test it out? Can I get some good data? Can I then take that data back to my constituents and show the value that we had good outcomes with the money, where we achieve those improvements we were looking for. So that's all I had.
So I'm gonna pose a question to Councilor Abel, and then I have Councilor Harrison as well after Councilor Abel. So there's been two suggestions. One is to take a look at the pools for the summer, and either doing a free or $1 days. I think our splash parks are $1, aren't they, for the kiddos?
Yes, Surfside is $1.
Okay.
So the only other two outdoor pools that we run are Morse Park Pool on 20th and Carr and Glennon Heights, in the Glennon Heights community. Sorry, I don't know the address.
Thanks. So I guess my question is, would you be willing to take a look at doing something like that this summer, then continuing this conversation with the 2017 Community Resources Master Plan?
I have a few things I'll respond to. Your question and the one about the pools, certainly if we include the indoor pools and make it year-round. Kids don't need exercise just in the summer. Summer enrichment programs are usually enrichment for the mind, not the body. And we're talking about exercise, not keeping kids busy during the summer. Again, I'd be willing to do pools, but all pools. We want in, Councilwoman Gutwein called for more input and then held up a sustainability survey or plan that was based on input. It was based on 250 replies to 5 surveys. That's 50 per survey. We have a senior program, do we not, that allows senior citizens to use our recreational facilities. To what extent?
To what extent? So yes, we have a pricing structure that is reduced for both the youth, which to us is ages 3 to 17, and for seniors, age 62 and plus.
Okay. I'd like to ask the 11 members here, how many of us do not have access to these recreation centers for free? And our families? All of us. I believe all city staff gets the same benefit. The last time I checked, it was some years ago, but Jefferson County open space employees, Jefferson County commissioners, elected officials from Jefferson County cities all had free passes to our park and rec facilities. Is that still the case?
No, that isn't the case any longer. So that's been updated. So as it relates to our city employees, they do have access to our recreation centers, and that's admission to the centers. That isn't the program. So they can use the programs that are paid for through basic admission. I know that's complicated, but when you come to a rec center, there's a package of programs you can take advantage of for the cost of admission. Then there are other programs that you pay separately for, and those programs aren't available to the employees at no cost.
We're talking about basic admission.
That's right.
And the kids' passes as well, not to special programs.
That's right. The conversation is about just admission programs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give up mine for some kid. So there's the answer. If we can make it all pools, you know, and I am at the mercy of 10 other people on this. I'll settle for what I can get, but I'm very surprised at the tone of this conversation and the reluctance to, and a pilot program I might be willing to do, because as I say, and you know, we don't have a Tabor refund vote coming up for 2 years, so we would get the Tabor benefit at least for those 2 years. I think we could make it a pilot program, and I am not opposed to more information. Excuse me? I'm not opposed to more information and a study session perhaps.
Okay, so I mean, it seems like everybody who's chimed in feels like this is a good idea and they want to understand it more. So I don't see a reluctance to wanting to go forward. I think there's a desire to want to go forward with better information and a better, understanding of what this is and what this isn't, and where could we best utilize it. Is it this process or not? We don't know. So I'd like to move us towards some sort of decision, because we have the rest of the budget to discuss tonight. And I don't think I've heard one person say they don't want to continue this conversation. So I'd like to get us to that point if we could. I still have 4 folks who'd like to speak. So I'm going to go to Councilor Harrison, Roybal, and then Mayor Pro Tem Johnson and Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I would like to suggest is this project as a pilot project might be absolutely perfect for ACIC to look at. And here's why I'm thinking this, Charlie, is they can look at other cities and see what they've done, and then they can come back and we can, in the middle of, as soon as they can, we could ask them to fast track this particular idea. And then what they could do is they could come back and give us some information, what the rest of us are asking. We can do an appropriation in the middle of the summer if they come back with good information. This budget is for now, but if the information, because I'm hearing lots of positives, I don't think you're getting any no's. All you're getting is, we need structure around this. I would be supporting this. It's the devil in the details. That's what's my problem, is I like the idea of making sure kids can swim and exercise. You've got my support there. What you don't have my support on right now is the details of how to make it work. And I'm not sure that I'm ready to ask staff to implement something really quickly until we have a better idea of a structure of how to make it work.
Councilor Roybal? Oh, okay.
Councilor Harrison took a little bit of my speech, but Councilor Abel, I really support you on this. It's a great idea moving forward. The kids are, it's all about the kids. And your idea is having a pool pass over during the winter months. Let's say on the holidays when they're off 2 weeks, they can, they get cabin fever, they can go to the rec center, do some swimming, do some exercise, do whatever they do at the rec center. During the summer months, again, they can go to different pools, go in there, and it's a healthy thing for them. We know where they're at, and they're at the pools, they're not getting in trouble. And I think that's a positive feedback. So yes, I do support you. What I would like to see maybe is staff or somebody come in and say, okay, maybe we can ask staff to draft up a preliminary budget and what they would like to see or what they can handle at this time to progress forward. And I think that's what we're all looking at, is finances. The bottom line is dollars and cents. And, Mr. Dorr is pretty good at that. I believe he is. I think he can come up with some rough numbers and rough ideas of how many kids would participate. And I think he's a pretty good, he knows how to figure out the numbers of how many kids are going to be utilizing. So I would like to suggest that we ask our Director of Financing to take a look at that and see if he can get us some preliminary numbers or budgets or anything that we can to move forward on this.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Abel, I support you. I don't, is it appropriate to make a motion to take this to a study session so we can at least get something going? Because we're kind of going in a circle here. And, if that includes a pilot program, my concern taking it to ACIC, and even if you fast track it, sometimes that doesn't go as fast as we'd like. And I learned personally from the grocery cart issue, it took about 1.5 years, and the recommendations that came up there were more that could have come out of it. So I'd like to see us, we've got great thoughts up here, have a pilot program, maybe even look at means testing. I don't know if it's a budget issue, and at the same time, ask our finance director to come up with some numbers, but I'd like to see us move forward on this, and if I can make a motion, if it's appropriate, to somehow move forward.
So, if I might try to, let me ask a question, Ms. Hodson. Our next hearing is October 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible to have a rough estimate of at least the pool portion for maybe the holidays and the summer at our swimming pools? So with Christmas break, spring break's tough. I guess you could go off Jefferson County's spring break.
Thank you. There's a few ways that we can look at this. First of all, you don't need to make a decision on this tonight. You can still go forward with a budget, even final approval on the 24th, and this is always something that you can do. So there isn't a real urgency just for tonight. As I was listening to your conversation, there are some ways that we can look at this. I think we have a study session scheduled to talk about youth programs and activities, and I believe that's in November. So I think it's early November. I want to say it's the 7th. So that would be a nice time to have a broad, holistic look at least the youth population in our city. And as you all were visiting, I thought of another way to do a pilot program. As I have visited with Councilor Abel, in preparation for this conversation, we talked about how would these passes be distributed to the students, and the answer is, or the suggestion was, through the schools, through the public schools, the charter schools, homeschooling, in every way that we can. And I thought, a way to pilot this might be to select a point of time, maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks, that we can still do these passes, and we get some really good data in terms of what that use might be. So it's a pilot. It would be administered kind of in a minor way that we had visited about, and we would get some good data from that. So that might be an idea that you can think about. And that would give us, again, some good data in terms of what that use might be, how we staff up for that, or if we need to staff up for that, and any other unintended kind of consequences that may come from that. So that's a thought as well. So if you want, you can think about this, talk to constituents. My recommendation is wait until our study session on the 7th, which isn't far away, that's less than a month. And then you can make these recommendations, and we can always make this adjustment to the budget individually. This is a pretty significant change and an exciting one. So that's a recommendation, or at least a thought.
Thank you, Councilor Gutwein, then Councilor Abel, then Council President Shakti.
Thank you. So just wanted to quickly clarify, this is actually the sustainability plan that I was holding up earlier, which had over 400 participants and 33 meetings and lots of work that went into it. But also, I guess just to kind of back up about, I might be one of the only ones up here who's recently attended free days for kids at the zoo, for example, and then, you know, I used to, when Chet and I first moved here, we couldn't, we used to go to the Dollar Days all the time that are in the Foothills Recreation Center at the pools. So I 100% want to support and do something great for kids. And I do really appreciate all of the many programs and all of the other things that we've done as a community to support healthy kids, and would like to just continue having a conversation, making sure we're doing it the right way. Thank you.
Mr. Abel.
I just want to make sure that everyone knows we have touched a lot of the bases you're talking about. Staff didn't come up with these numbers off the top of their head. They talked to Denver, which is, as far as I know, the only other city in the metro area that has this program. What other cities would we reach out to? I'm in no big hurry. I would like to see us do something. We're coming into winter time, a time when most kids don't exercise. Swimming on the day after Thanksgiving and a couple of days around Christmas and New Year's is not going to keep kids healthy. It'll give them a diversion for a few days. This is not about diversion. This is not about daycare. This is about making sure our kids are healthy. And there is no time limit on that. I like more information, certainly. But I would like to know that my fellow counselors are going into this with an open mind. And I would not at all be satisfied with a few days this winter and then open 2 pools for folks next summer. I think we need to see to more than swimming. We're charging kids $3 an hour apiece to play tennis. And that seems to me to be burdensome. So, but I will go with the wishes of council.
So let's go forth with and see if we need to do a vote, we'll do a vote, or if we can have consensus off of what Council President or I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson suggested, and move this towards a study session, which would be November 7th. Would there be enough time to have some more information and look at things that we might be able to go into in parallel with the Community Resources Master Plan that is being undertaken?
Yeah, so on your calendar is a presentation and overview of youth services. So that would be the time we can do kind of that holistic look. And Councilor Abel, we can also give a deeper explanation of what we've learned from the City and County of Denver as it relates to implementation of this program. It passed in 2012, so whenever it was actually implemented, I'm guessing 13. So that may be some good information for you as well. We can make sure that's available.
So that's acceptable? Sure. Okay. So is that, all right. Okay. Council President Shakti, did you want your lights on? Yes. Okay.
I want to clarify that that study session will be, so first I want to thank Councilor Abel for pushing this issue, in that it's important to make sure that we're doing what we can for kids. And I hear what you're saying about you want us to have an open mind, and I will come with an open mind. It's important to me that the study session is answering the broader question of what's the best way to meet kids' needs, and this solution of passes to the rec center is a part of that conversation, so that we can figure out the best route moving forward to help our kids.
Okay, thank you. So at our study session, we tried to break this down into different departments And if we could maybe continue on that theme and start with questions, I'm going to put the police chief on the spot first. If we could start with any questions from council pertaining to the budget in the police category. All right, Councilor Franks.
And this may already be addressed in there, but I know that we say now that we're fully staffed up on our code enforcement. And I know there's been some talk earlier about better communication between the groups that handle things like off-leash dogs and waste and that. And I wanted to see if there was any granularity in the budget that kind of addressed maybe those communication systems, which would allow for better communication so we can see where we've got challenges and where we have repeat offenders on those types of issues.
It's good. That's a good question, Counselor. I'm not sure I quite understand it. We have as far as communication, we have a very robust communication system in the police department. We have a records management system that we all have access to. Code enforcement has access to. Animal control has access to. Police agents, detectives. So every person we contact that we document something about, we have a documentation with, is into that system. So somebody in code enforcement can check that system daily or whenever they need to see what other types of contacts somebody may have. So for example, if you go to a house where there's a complaint about weeds or some type of code enforcement violation, they can check that address, check that name of that individual, and see whether there's related issues with, say, for example, dog at large, off-leash dogs, those kind of things. Does that answer your question? I apologize.
It does. No, and that kind of tie in. I'll send you a couple example emails where it seemed to be that the information coming from city staff was that there was an information disconnect. And again, we don't need to go into, I'll give you a couple examples, but I just wanted to see if you had if you felt that you had the right communication tools in order to allow those departments to be able to share information.
Sure. Thank you. And we besides us, we have regular staff meetings with all our different staffs in patrol and investigations, and code enforcement attends a lot of these meetings. So there's a lot of information that's shared that may not be formalized. So, but thank you if you'd send that to me.
And Councilor Franks, that's a great question. Do you think it may have had to do with we were down a crime analyst for a certain amount of time? I know we were having some trouble pulling some of that data. Do you think that was part of it? And we're full board there now, correct?
Yes, sir. We have both. We're fully staffed with our crime analysis unit.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief McCaskey? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Public Works, Mr. Hutchison. Any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I mentioned this to Kathy and also to Larry, and I think I probably should have told you about it, Jay. We've got some language in the budget that is talking about eminent domain type issues regarding North Dry Gulch. Is it possible to add language that only after extensive community input?
That would be a normal process. I don't remember what the precise language is that's in the document, but that is our normal process. We've initiated contact with every property owner already. We've met with very nearly all of them at least once. We've had multiple contacts with several, and that will continue through the design process, any acquisition that's necessary, and certainly through the construction process as well. That's routine with every project. It wouldn't be just with the North Dry Gulch project. It's just part of the process.
That's reassuring. I think it would be helpful to have the language in the budget because there still is a lot of angst, and at least to have that language there helps to allay some of those frustrations that people have. I don't see a downside to it, is what I'm saying. Even though it's our process, if we still say it in words, this this budget is really a public policy document, and it's a directive of the way that we're going to go forward. So having language like that, I guess I just don't see a downside.
And I'm not objecting. The clarification question I would have for the council is would that language only be added to that particular project or to any project where there might be acquisitions? And that would be some guidance that would be helpful.
Probably be appropriate to have it in all circumstances. However, in the North Dry Gulch, the language is specific and has the wording of eminent domain. And since it's already listed in there like that, I'd like to ask council to support this. There's a lot at stake for a lot of people north of Colfax. And they just need to be reassured that the way that we're going about things is honest and wholesome. Yeah. I'd appreciate your support on this, council.
So, Councilor Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, Councilor Johnson has a very good point. We need to be very sensitive, cognizant to how we approach our citizens. And I think this is another way of saying, hey, we understand, we're doing everything we can on our part, meet us a little bit of the way. But as long as we express and let them know that eminent domain is not the first thing on our agenda, it's the last thing. That's the last result that we have. And if we emphasize and ask them if we can work through it, I think we'll see a lot of positiveness.
So I would just like to chime in. I think that Adrian Stanchu presented to us that I think over 90% of the time we're able to negotiate the property sale. And this is, like it or not, a fundamental function of government. And I have great faith and trust in our staff that we go and do it to the letter of the law. And there's not a heavy-handedness that we want to have take place. I can think of one time we even went above and beyond to reimburse a business owner whose land was taken by RTD and actually relocated them with a business relocation package. So this is a budget document. That is land acquisitions. That's something that's few and far between, and I think the language as is suitable and acceptable for me and for the city of Lakewood. So with that, I will though ask if folks would like to direct staff to do that and have that language added throughout the budget document on any situation where there's eminent domain.
Right now, I'm particularly concerned about North Dry Gulch. There's, as you know, Jay, there's been a lot of frustration there. I don't know if it says it any other place. I didn't read it in other areas as much as I did in North Dry. I don't see a downside to adding language that we are going to do this after extensive community input. That to me just seems very reassuring and shows that we are doing things in a way that this is a document, Mayor, that is going to take us forward. It's a public policy document. It's a directive. And there's no downside to putting language in.
And I would question one thing about that, though, is the potential use of eminent domain. It's not a public process. It's not something that, it's a negotiation of real property between the city, and it could be a potential taking that does come to the city council, and that's the final public process part of that. So it's already prescribed, and just because I'm not sure what that language, what extra protection that would give. I've had the opportunity to speak with some folks on North Dry Gulch who have been very happy with the city's outreach, and you know, it's not perfect, but we aren't even close to being to where we need to be. So again, I wouldn't support that. Councilor Coop?
I'd like to ask Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, do you have a page number where that is?
I don't. I should have had it before I came. Maybe Jay, do you know right where it is?
The North Dry Gulch project is mentioned on page 496. Let me look and see if it might be in another location as well.
And I can read it here. It says this program will design acquired property rights if needed. But there's also language, I believe, that talks about eminent domain, and I should have had that.
If needed.
I don't find another location where that project's spoken about.
Okay.
So maybe Mayor Pro Tem, while you're looking, Councilor Franks, you have a question?
No, it was more of a comment. I'm concerned if we have a special exception. I'm more comfortable with something that's broad, not that I know what the broad thing is, but I'm less comfortable with a specific, because then you get into the favoritism where folks can call that out. And I'm opening up the electronic version. I'll do a keyword search here, so.
Okay.
And Councilor Harrison?
I was just going to suggest that maybe a footnote explaining the eminent domain process might be a better way of handling it. And then that way it's across the board with everything, and it's explained, and whether it's the North Dry Gulch process or any other process, it would be a footnote in here that would explain the process, and then it gives the citizens the information. That might be an easier way to handle it.
It's a nice suggestion. Mr. Cox, did you want to?
Well, we've been talking along the same lines to make sure that the language is applied the same way to any reference, if it needs to be referenced at all. It would be nice if there were a definition section where you could say eminent domain as used in this document means. A couple of thoughts on what kind of language you might be able to add that could be accurate and not create unreasonable expectations is something like eminent domain to the extent allowed by law and following the process prescribed by law, or eminent domain if in the event negotiations are unsuccessful, something along those lines. Because I think that's the point. It is an individual negotiation rather than a community input type situation when you're talking about a particular property being acquired. So I'd be concerned about using the phrase community input or public process, but I think we could say something that just indicates it's following a negotiation process or subject to the process that's prescribed by law.
So I imagine there's a Colorado revised statute that outlines, and maybe it could mention, or is that too?
I wouldn't expect the typical reader to follow the link to a statutory site, but we have.
With a summary, though, if we had a short summary and had, at least where it was quoted, because, I mean, it's pretty easy now to just Google those numbers. And
Sure. The process that we've used and used recently to authorize the negotiations and ultimately that process, those documents, the resolutions and ordinances that we use have a pretty good explanation of how it works and what the steps in the process have to be. So certainly we can come up with something that summarizes it in a few words and in terms that folks can understand.
289. Ms. Frank said 289. Thank you for your electronic search. Is it different? Electronic numbers different?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I guess it's all a matter of terminology. I was looking for definitions. We do have a glossary, Mr. Dorr reminds me, and that has definitions for a number of terms. So we could, in there have an entry for eminent domain and describe the process or reference the source of authority for that process. I think that might be the best way to make sure that it's understood uniformly throughout.
Well, and I guess too, and thank you, Councilor Franks, for finding this. The expectation is listed in here on page 289, and it states the last sentence, all property needs will be acquired in accordance with established timeframes and with a minimal use of the powers of eminent domain. Councilor Abel?
Pardon me, I was going to suggest that we use something a little more friendly and warmer than just a citation and quoting the Colorado statutes, and I think that this verbiage works fine. Can we reference that as a footnote on the pages where we have the use, and elsewhere we refer to property acquisition as opposed to the words eminent domain. So if we could footnote that on each of those pages, that might serve the purpose.
Is council cool with that? Yep. Looking to my left, to my right. All right. So is that clear? Great.
Yes, that's clear.
All right, thank you. I didn't mean it like that. Just want to make sure my verbiage was coming through, that you were following.
And to the attorneys present, I want to apologize for inferring that CRS sites can be cold and legalese.
I'm with you.
I figured my colleague was going to pick up on that. All right, continuing on with Public Works. Okay. Do you have some more Public Works?
In regards to the D10 project,
Yes.
I believe it was mentioned at the study session that this was going to be on hold, or some language that was, Kathy, you want to speak to that?
Yes, so it's proposed as a recommendation from our study session that we add this language, and we would need approval from you. This is in the project, I don't know what page number, but it's in the project W Rail Bike Path Connections, and under project description, we would insert the following. This project has been paused for additional community discussion and evaluation of alternatives for the segment between Oak Street and Kipling Street. An additional discussion with City Council will occur prior to the project resuming. It seems to capture what was asked, and if you all agree, then we'll include it.
I got to my left, to my right.
I think that sounds lovely, and that also, frankly, kind of talks about public input. I mean, we're going to say that in one instance, but not comfortable in another. I mean, isn't it saying has been paused for additional community input? I guess, to me, we're sending a mixed message. We're willing to put it in one area and not in another. I just don't see a downside to putting the language with extensive community input in.
Yeah, as I see it, the difference is that this is talking about alternatives to this proposed project rather than should this individual piece of property, can we reach an agreement on negotiated value, or do we have to resort to the other practice of eminent domain? So I think it is a little bit different. The community input is on the project level rather than the individual properties. But I think we've agreed that we'll put some language in regarding eminent domain and what it means in layman's terms, and so.
Councilor Coop?
I have a question about the funds for this section of bike path, possible bike path. Is that we're leveraging funds from another outside source?
Yes, that's correct. For the W Rail Bike Path Connection project, which includes two segments, And it's on page 469 for those who want to look. It includes $480,000 of city capital improvement fund money and $1,920,000 of federal funds.
Okay, and this is no way questioning whether this should be stopped or go forward. I'm not questioning that whatsoever, but is there a time when those additional funds are going to go away?
Yes. Fortunately, it's not imminent. I think with the efforts to have the additional discussion will not cause that to happen.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Councilor Abel.
The bike path, there's a new development also in this budget around possible acquisition of park property that could lessen the cost of that bike path altogether by rerouting. So, secondly, Mr. Cox, I believe there are, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hutchison, but there are 2 possible scenarios for the North Dry Gulch project as well. So, given that that has not been determined as far as I know which of the 2 we would be using, I think that the comparison with the bike path is rather appropriate.
And I think that's fine. I think the difference here is that we're talking about this project being placed on hold, and the language explains why that is. I don't know that that's not the case apparently with the Dry Gulch. Even if there is a discussion of alternatives, that still needs to be had. But you know,
I think Dry Gulch is moving at a pace where it doesn't have to be put on hold to allow the time for extra consideration.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you. I appreciate your input, Councilor Abel. To me, I do see a similarity because there could be changes in the North Dry Creek with community input. The changes could come because of the community input. And that might have happened had we had community input with the D10 bike path prior to taking it forward. Is that possible? Is that correct, maybe?
I guess the understanding is we've already addressed the question pertaining to property acquisitions on 289. And the question that I thought I had consensus on to move forward was the additional language that was read by the city manager. This project has been paused for additional community discussion. So I thought we had a consensus to move that in or move towards. Is that accurate? So I guess you just have a comment pertaining to the process?
I do have a comment. With the D10 bike path, it may have turned out different had there been community input prior. Now we're on pause because we do have community input. Would you see it that way as well?
We're on pause because we've heard from citizens since the design that that has expressed some real concern about the design and the impact on private property. So as a result of that, we're looking at other alternatives that may have a different impact on private property. So that's where this is now, and where staff is working at being able to provide options that you can look at, and there will be public process to talk about those options as well. So that's why the project is on pause, because the original design and because of what we heard from the citizens was concerning, and we said, let's rethink this and see if there's another way to do it. Does that answer that? So that's why it's on pause.
I understand that. However, had we gotten community input prior to going forward, we may have been looking at a different process or a different plan altogether. And to me, that's what's in common with the North Dry Gulch. If we get public input ahead of time, and have extensive community input prior to both of these projects have got eminent domain on the table.
Yeah, so as it relates to the actual design of North Dry Gulch or Dry Gulch, that will entail, and as Jay said, that has included public conversation, and that will continue. It's different, though, when there's actually an action around property acquisition, and so that's different than the actual larger design and where the drainage area would go and what that design may be. So I think we're talking two different things here. And so the reason for the pause on the D10 trail is we're relooking at that design. We're relooking at where exactly that trail could be and what are the impacts of that trail going east-west along that corridor.
Councilor Abel?
Again, there are, the last I heard, 2 possible plans for North Dry Gulch. Each includes a varying amount of property acquisition. One would require less property acquisition, but may be more complicated in other ways, maintenance-wise. The other, the open ditch, would require more property acquisition. So I don't recall a decision being made on which of those 2 designs will be the final one we choose. So, unless I've missed something, Mr. Hutchison, I have heard one referred to as a preferred plan. I don't know who prefers it, but there are 2 out there that have varying degrees of property acquisition. So it does seem to have some similarity with the pause on the bike plan, although this doesn't need to be paused again because it's the pace the project is moving at which the project is moving is we still have time to consider and make a final decision on which of those 2 plans. But I'm not sure that the same language would necessarily apply on North Dry Gulch, and I'm wondering if the footnote might not be acceptable there, where we need the larger explanation on the D10 path. But that's...
Well, the D10 path has already gone farther down the road, and that's why we're on pause, because folks didn't understand what was going to happen till it was happening. Sure. That's what I want to avoid on North Dry Creek, that we get input prior to having so much frustration and anger, frankly.
I can say I think it's been duly noted to staff that this is an important process and appreciate those concerns. And at a high level, we're still at the policy level, not the designers of the Gulch plan. And I'm sure that we will continue to have those and appreciate staff's work with the community to make that project continue to move forward, which will continue to have an active role in that process. Anything else for Public Works? Okay, well, thank you. The fun stuff, community, well, it's all fun, my apologies. Except for IT. Just kidding. Kidding, Mark. Just kidding, Barb. We're excited that Ms. Franks is here tonight because we might get some questions for you. So, community resources. Are there questions for community resources? Mr. Abel.
Did I mention the kids' park and rec passes?
Could you please elaborate to us a little bit more? Get the coffee going. So I guess I would just have one thing to say in community resources, and this is maybe a conversation that we could have, and it might tie into the master plan. But I think we've heard from plenty of council members that there is some want to figure out a way to have the Loveland House find its way into some sort of inventory. And that may not be for this book right here, but to continue as we go forward and to potentially look at other partnerships, I think that would be a meaningful project. Councilor Vincent?
I agree.
Councilor Abel?
I'll double down on that. But I believe the point you make about it may not be part of this document here. I think we need a full-blown study session, certainly on the Loveland House, but it is probably the most important remaining unprotected structure in Lakewood.
Yes, ma'am.
Just like to say too that it's high on Jefferson County's list also. I think they've designated as the #1 structure.
All right. Anything else community resource related? All right. IT. Go Barb. Councilor Franks.
Really the main thing that I wanted to talk about is just making sure that our IT group has the right resources to kind of expand those search functions and that. I'm continuing to get contacts from constituents, and I have to kind of help them figure out what terms to put in, kind of how to go. And again, if we're going to make our citizens kind of self-sufficient and they can get the information they need, I just want to make sure you have the resources in there to make those changes.
I believe we do. We're going to make that a 2017 governance item for discussion. So we'll have to see how that ends up in the prioritization of all the other investment opportunities.
Okay. Councilor, you're not done yet. Councilor Abel. Two. Whoa.
Again, I have concerns about the practice of folks getting into our system and holding it for ransom, and I want to make sure that we have adequate dollars in here to make the security certain.
That's correct. We're making security more and more of a priority. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when, and so we're doing everything we can. We're going to add more staff to the security effort beginning next year. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so those are our 4 categories. Any other questions pertaining to the budget? If not, I would entertain a motion to set the public hearing to move it forward to the 24th, please.
Mayor Paul, I move that ordinance O 2016-13 introduced on first reading be published in the Denver Post with the second and final public hearing set for October 24th, 2016.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments? I would just make one and again thank the staff and Larry for all your hard work in putting this together. A great presentation, and look forward to the public hearing. Councilor Abel?
There have been a number of questions raised and answered. I think staff, I'll second Adam on that. The staff has done a really responsive job. And this year's budget has additions. We've added in places where we might be looking at property acquisition. We've noted that, and I think we have brought the budget a long way in the last few months. And I think it's more readable and more responsive. Thank you.
All right, please cast your votes. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you. Will the clerk please read?
The consent agenda consists of items 6 through 8 inclusive.
Thank you.
Item 6, Resolution 2016-48, approving the sole source purchase of ignition immobilizers. Item 7, approving the minutes of the regular city council meeting of September 26, 2016. And item 8, accepting the minutes of the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Communities Executive Committee meetings of July 6th and August 3rd, both 2016.
Thank you. So I would now like to open the public comment period on the consent agenda, consisting of Resolution 26-48. Nobody's signed up to speak. Seeing none, I will close public comment and ask for a motion.
Mayor Paul, I move for approval of the council minutes, for acceptance of the minutes of boards and commissions, and for adoption of Resolution 2016-48, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilor Wickman.
I'm not going to ask the question, so please don't stand up. But I am going to make the comment I made last time. I'm concerned about this use of sole source. I think process-wise, we should always use a bid. Having said that, I trust you did the right job. End of discussion.
Thank you, sir. Please cast your votes. Oh, I vote too. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you, Division Chief Becker and Chief McCaskey, for hanging out with us. And now we'll go to an executive report. Ms. Hodson, you thought you might have something, but you might not.
I have no report.
All right. I would just like to comment on a couple things. I'd like to welcome our colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, back from her vacation. She has been on an airplane for a long time and made it out tonight, so you're doing a good job. Thank you. And Cider Days was a great success. A lot of folks, a lot of fun. Thank you for that. And then I also had the opportunity to drop by the community cleanup. So thank you to our all the staff who participated in that. There were a lot of old televisions out there, so it was a great event for the community. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate them. My husband and I did go to France, and just for the rest of the story, one of my favorite melodies is Starry, Starry Night. That was to memorialize the beautiful painting that Van Gogh painted in Ariel when he was standing on a bridge. When it was painted, there was no light. He had a hat on with candles in order to see his paints and brushes. Now you know the rest of the story.
Fun. Thank you. Council President Shakti.
A few things. The planning department has movies that they're showing on the next 3 Tuesdays at noon in the Cultural Center. And we do this every year, and these are on, this year it's on architecture. Then Tuesday from 10 to 12 and from 7 to 9 at the Heritage Center, you can give comments on the Heritage Center master plan. So how do we want to be developing the Heritage Center? How do we want it to be? I noticed coming in here today some employee shared bikes, which is cool. And then last week I went to a breakfast that was about the economic impact of the SCFD, so the regional tax that goes to culture and the arts. And just some interesting information from that. They say we make 360, so the cumulative tax for the region is 53 million. They say we make 367 million from cultural tourism, so that's people coming from other places to Denver to spend money on culture. We're top in the nation for adults who perform or create art, top for attendance of classical music, dance, theater, and art museums. We have more startups, this is like, creativity in the business world. We have more startups than San Francisco. And that's what I have.
Fun stuff. Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. Just want to mention the Bear Creek Lake Park Haunted Trail Adventure, also lovingly known as the Spooky Hike. I've heard. But it is a Halloween walk at Bear Creek Lake Park, and you can register online. Thank you. Oh, and that's, did I say October 15th, 4 to 7 p.m.? Thank you.
Councilor Franks.
Yes, just first wanted to thank everybody that came out to our Ward 4 meeting this past weekend, of the candidates for District 23 as well as the Jeffco commissioners. Really appreciate the good attendance, the great questions, and just wanted to thank everybody for that.
Councilor Coop, nothing. Councilor Abel.
We're having our Ward 1 meeting Saturday morning at 9 at Holy Shepherd Lutheran Church, 920 Kipling Street. It'll be an open floor for community members to bring their concerns, questions, issues, and comments to our attention.
Councilor Harrison.
For those who are in Ward 5, we have a wonderful speaker that I can hardly wait. This Saturday at Bear Valley Church, our own finance director, Larry Dorr, will be talking about the budget. So if you really haven't got enough, come listen again. Thank you.
Councilor Roybal.
Get a little too late. We are going to have our ward meeting on the 22nd. We have invited the president of the board of directors for South Sheridan Water and Sanitation to come speak to us. So please come.
Councilor Vincent.
Yes, this Tuesday we have our Ward 2 meeting, starts at 7:30 in the morning at 1580 Teller. It's an open agenda, whatever anybody wants to discuss. The 13th, which I think is Thursday, is the Morris Park annual meeting, and that's at the Clements Center. And yes, it does start at 7 o'clock. And yes, the Broncos are playing that night. And the things we do at council. And I have one more. The Two Creeks Neighborhood annual meeting is the following Tuesday, and that starts at 6:30, and that's at the A&E Center. I think it's the A&E Center, which is there on Colfax and Salisbury, and that starts at 6:30.
You may have read it wrong. It's our meeting is Wednesday. Not Tuesday.
It's Wednesday, not Tuesday. Thank you.
And I'm scheduled to go to that Morris Park event. Mayor Pro Tem, what are you doing on Thursday night at 7 p.m.? Councilor Wickman.
2 announcements. One of them you need to help me with. I remember seeing it on today's email, but for the life of me, I can't remember the date. The police department is doing the drug take back. Does anybody know the date?
October 22nd.
Okay, very good. The other one I do know is there's going to be a public meeting to discuss the possible annexation of the southern part of Rooney Valley. And that will be on Thursday, October 20th at 6 o'clock at the Red Rocks Baptist Church. Those are the announcements. Now, I have a couple questions, which I don't expect an answer today, but in a couple weeks I'll follow up on it. Some people are starting to come out interested in running for council next year. So I'm getting a couple questions, 2 questions so far. Number one is we're looking for a confirmation that Ramey would be eligible to run for another term. The second question is, if somebody runs for office, do they have to accept a salary? They're interested in running gratis. Like I said, I'm not looking for an answer right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Greer? Mr. Cox? Anything else for the good of the order? Ms. Hodson?
I do have one more thing, and I just wanted to make sure I thanked our finance director, Larry Dorr, and all of his staff, as well as the budget coordination team, for their great talent and skills. I respect them greatly and appreciate all their work.
All right. Well, thank you to our agent.